Hello ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for tuning in to Crashy News, where we dive deep into the facts regarding Crash Bandicoot, both new and even old. September 2022 marks the 26th anniversary of Crash Bandicoot, and to celebrate, we wanted to highlight what the best ways to play the original games are today, from the original hardware right through to the remakes on PS4 and Xbox One, and beyond. This video is divided up into 4 broad categories. First, we'll take a look at the analog ecosystem, where you can play the original discs on a PlayStation 1 or 2, which only support analog output. Second is the PlayStation 3, including using the original discs and the digital PS1 Classics. Third, we'll go over how PS1 games are to play on PlayStation Plus Premium. Lastly, we'll discuss the modern remakes, the N-Sane Trilogy and Nitro-Fueled. We'll leave it up to you to decide which of these is the best way to play, since the various factors will weigh differently for different people. One topic we won't cover in depth here is emulation and other similar solutions. Between emulators on PC and mobile, hacking a PlayStation Mini, or devices like the Mister, it's far beyond the scope we intended for this video. Instead, we'll only be sticking to official methods. And no, the Uncharted 4 demo doesn't count.
What? You gotta be kidding me.
Let's start from where it all began, the PlayStation 1. The original Crash Bandicoot games released yearly on Sony's debut console, starting with the first game in 1996 to Crash Bash in 2000. Playing these on original hardware is of course the most authentic experience, from the controller you're using down to the capabilities of the console itself. Those used to emulator footage might be shocked at the differing and rather pixelated look, but this is genuinely what the PS1 was outputting back in the day. While Crash 2, 3, CTR and Bash have aged fairly well all things considered, the original is easily the most difficult to go back to. You can only save after a bonus round or collecting a gem, and you can't retry bonus rounds without restarting the level, and after you've finished one, you can't go back to it again. There's no analog stick support, those were released a year after. There's no invisible walls to stop you from walking off the side-scrolling sections. You can't tell how many boxes you've smashed, and mechanics like earning gems to unlock extra paths are never explained to the player. Most infamously, checkpoints don't remember the crates you hit, so gems require you to smash every crate in the level without dying. Crash 1 also doesn't remember your lives when you save, meaning you can reach a save point, turn the console off for the night, then reload the next day only to be staring down the barrel of the third island with only 4 lives to your name. Yikes! Fortunately, all of these points are addressed in Crash 2 and 3, although no Crash game supports autosave, unlike its compatriot Spyro the Dragon. The PlayStation 2 may be a more convenient option to play the original discs in an authentic environment, since you're more likely to have one. Since the PS2 has a lot of its predecessor's components, all 5 Crash games look incredibly similar to original hardware. In addition to the discs, you can also use the PS1's controllers and memory cards if you have them. In addition to faster loading, the PS2 also allows you to enable bilinear texture smoothing, which actually looks rather nice and maybe more to your liking. We've had it applied to all our PS2 footage in this video, but you can leave it off if you'd prefer a look closer to original PS1 hardware. The only issue of note is a fairly visible one. For objects that use transparency, the alpha channel is dimmer than it's supposed to be, letting you see its entire canvas. This includes the warp vortexes, heavy machinery vents, the smoke from Cortex's blaster, the bonus round text, these flamethrower technicians, the clouds over Earth in Crash 3, the warp orb lightning, these water ripples, underwater light shafts, the turbo flames in CTR, the track minimap, the smoke particles for Aku Aku tutorials, the edges of many HUD elements. It's everywhere. The PlayStation 1 and 2 were released before consoles used HDMI output, with most people using the stock yellow composite cables that came with them. Even if your HD TV has a port for composite video, or any of the other connections, the visuals will look smudgy and have tons of input lag if you plug your consoles directly into them, so we don't recommend doing this. If you don't intend to pick up a CRT, or use the PS1's LCD screen add-on, we highly recommend grabbing an upscaler device so that your consoles are more presentable and playable on an HD TV. If you want a detailed breakdown, check out the My Life in Gaming channel and watch the RGB Masterclass series, in particular the RGB 100 videos and RGB 206 that covers PS1 games. You'll want to avoid cheap analog to HDMI converter boxes that you can buy from a game store or online from sites like Amazon. These devices do a poor job of converting the signal, making the picture smudgy, interpreting colors incorrectly, adding tons of input lag, and adding the interlacing shimmer. You definitely get what you pay for here. If you were to ask us, the best option would be the RetroTink series, thanks to their high quality upscaling that will work with practically any display. This gives you 3 different avenues. If you just want to plug it and go to clear out the picture and remove input lag, the RAD2X cable on retrogamingcables.co.uk works very well for PS1 games. It'll only be 480p, but it'll be handled much better than what your TV will do. Or your TV may not have the right inputs in the first place. The RAD2X cable also works on PS2 if you set the console to RGB mode. However, it doesn't work with PS2 games set to run in 480p, like Mind of a Mutant and the Jack sequels can. If 480p is important to you, you should consider the 2X Pro with some component cables instead. If you absolutely must have the best picture possible from a PS1 or 2, the RetroTink 5X will give you jaw-dropping results like the ones seen earlier in the video, especially if you use optimal sampling. Check out Wobbling Pixels for recommended settings. To get the clearest picture quality, you'll also need to get the right video cable. Both the PlayStation 1 and 2 support a European connector called SCART that uses an RGB signal, and offers a clearer and more saturated picture over the yellow composite cable. The PS2 also supports component cables, which were used worldwide and look just as good as using a SCART cable. You can check out retroaccess.com or retrogamingcables.co.uk for high quality cables. There is an argument to be made that composite is the intended look, given that certain graphics expect to be shown with it. The starfields in Crash 2 are a good example. The pink and yellow stars appear only slightly tinted after being blurred by the composite signal. A third option, S-Video, is a good middle ground, with composites colors but with a sharper look. Ultimately, it's up to you to decide which video output you want to use. So what if you have the discs but want the convenience of HDMI without modding or an upscaler? In that case, the PlayStation 3 is your best bet, because every PS3 is able to play PS1 discs, even the slim and top-loading super slim models. That means that even after their PlayStation stores are shut down, you can still buy the physical discs, pop them into a PS3, grab a wireless controller, and enjoy Crash Bandicoot without any extra setup. Presentation-wise, the PS3 sticks to the native 240p resolution that PS1 games used, then upscales the picture to present large chunky pixels, which are super sharp, but the aspect ratio is a bit too wide. But if you don't like PS1 dithering, you can reduce it a bit by tapping the PS button and turning on smoothing. It's a bit blurry to us, but the dithering is almost completely invisible. Considering how close the DualShock 3 is to the PS1's DualShock, this will be a very authentic way to experience these games. If you're not a fan of the controller, you can connect the PS4's DualShock 4 via USB to play the games that way, or try pairing them via Bluetooth. You won't have Rumble though, and you can't use the PS button to quit the game or access other settings, so we suggest keeping a DualShock 3 handy for those. And for some reason, the DualSense doesn't work at all.
I guess you didn't have what it takes, Crash.
One extra perk is that playing the discs on PS3 is the only official method that offers improved performance. Scenes that will cause slowdown do not do so on PS3 with a disc, including Crash 1's save screen, and whenever a large amount of explosions are happening. A big problem, however, one that afflicts all 5 games, is input lag, making things feel stickier. You'll get hit by an enemy just before you spin, you'll fail to high jump off ledges correctly, and you'll be making lots of cornering mistakes in CTR. If you're sensitive to input lag, this may turn you off the PS3 method entirely. But the biggest issue is if you play the PAL version of Crash Bash, where the game plays a lot faster than it normally would. In addition to making cutscene audio quickly go out of sync,
How many times must you be told? You
You cannot defeat me.
I have heard enough of your shallow wisdom. It is I who is the strongest, and it is evil that will ultimately prevail.
The game is even more difficult than normal because of how much faster the gameplay is. Check out how fast this match of Polar Panic is after the first person is eliminated. Another, more complicated option is the PS1 Classics, the digital releases of PS1 games that you could buy from the PlayStation Store on PS3, PSP, and PS Vita. Unfortunately, it's no longer possible to download them to PSP, and the PS3 and Vita stores had a shutdown scare in March 2021. As of this rising, we really don't know how much longer these stores will last, but as we'll explain later, there's a good reason why you want to try this anyway if you can. All 4 of Naughty Dog's Crash games are available as PS1 Classics, with Japan also getting Crash Bash. If the PS3 and Vita stores are still available to you, you'll have to generate a device setup password on your computer and enter that instead of your normal password when you sign in. You can't add funds on these systems either, you'll have to do it somewhere else first. PS1 Classics on PS3 appear blurrier than using a game disc. Curiously, the smoothing option also changes the aspect ratio to be thinner than it usually is. The only downside is for Crash 2. For some reason, switching to analog stick controls doesn't work, something that doesn't affect playing from a disc. The PlayStation Vita and its HDMI outputting brother, the PSTV, can also play them well, and on the OLED Vita especially the games look gorgeous thanks to their use of saturated colors and the device's large screen. If you have a PSTV, you can also use a DualShock 3 on it. Playing on Vita has an extra bonus for Crash Bandicoot 1. Since it was released before the DualShock was, you normally can't play it with the left analog stick. However, on Vita and PSTV, you can map the directional buttons to the left stick, if that's how you prefer to play it. You can use a similar trick to map R2 and L2 to the right stick, allowing for right stick camera controls in titles like Spyro the Dragon. Sadly, that doesn't work on PSTV.
Goodbye for now.
Frustratingly, the Vita method is a no-go for those in the US. For whatever reason, on US Vitas it's completely impossible to purchase, download, or transfer any Crash game to the device. This is more restrictive than other unicorn titles like Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy IX, which can be copied over from a PS3 even though they can't be bought or downloaded on the Vita itself. The situation is even worse on PSP, no matter what region it is. This is because the latest PS3 firmware uses two-factor authentication, but since the PSP doesn't expect this, any attempt to copy a game to it will result in an error. Since the PSP store can't be accessed on the device itself anymore, this makes it impossible to legally play digital games on it if you didn't already have them on a memory stick. Like Vitas from the US, the only remaining solutions are non-official methods, like custom firmware and apps. Across June of 2022, PlayStation Plus Premium was rolled out for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, giving players access to 400 PS4 and PS5 games, time-limited game trials, and PS1, 2, P, and 3 games, although PS3 games can only be streamed. As of this writing, none of the Crash games are available on PS Plus Premium, which is a shame because it would have been the most convenient way to play them in 2022. Several titles allow you to create save states at any time, as well as rewind the game if you make a mistake. This would have let you try Crash 1's bonus rounds again without restarting the entire level like normal, or help clear harder events in Crash Bash. In the case of saving anywhere, you could completely circumvent Crash 1's awkward save system. Another upshot is that the rendering for 3D graphics has been massively increased to somewhere near 1440p, which would help a lot with Crash Team Racing and picking up obstacles and items ahead on the track. However, there are a lack of key visual options. You can't change the resolution back to the original 240p, you can't fix the PS1's infamous warping on models and textures, and you can't turn off the dithering effect.
I am Buzz Lightyear. I come in peace.
The PS5's emulator also has questionable errors. For example, certain visual effects are missing, like the lens flares of these drills in the first level of Toy Story 2. The emulator will also increase the vertical resolution to fill the top and bottom of the screen. That sounds good in theory, but it means the picture will stretch whenever there's letterboxing, like in these tutorial screens. PS Plus Premium's price tag is a bit hard to swallow if you just want Crash Bandicoot, but there are silver linings. Some titles can be bought individually without PS Plus Premium, which can be cheaper. But even if Crash isn't among them, there is a way around it. If you purchase a PS1 Classic on PS3 or Vita that's also on PS Plus Premium, you'll be able to download that game to your PS4 or 5 without a PS Plus subscription. Overall, PlayStation Plus Premium should be one of the more easily accessible ways to play the PS1 Crash games, if they're made available, and especially if you can buy them individually from the subscription. If you don't mind the emulation quirks, it'd be the most immediate way to play the original Crash games. Again, if we were able to play them on it.
To infinity and beyond!
But what if the PS1 games are just two 90s for you? Vicarious Visions made platforming history by releasing the Crash Bandicoot N-Sane Trilogy in 2017, a remake of the first 3 Crash games, followed by Beanox's Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled Remake in 2019. They are easily the most convenient way to play the games that started it all, because they were released on PS4 and Xbox One, and so are compatible with PS5 and Xbox Series X and S respectively. You can also play them on the Nintendo Switch. However, for the N-Sane Trilogy, there are visual sacrifices made to pull that off, so we suggest playing on dedicated consoles, unless you really don't like the 4K look or value being able to play them on the go. The N-Sane Trilogy is the more divisive of the 2 remakes. Given the age of the platforming trio, Crash 1 especially, there are a lot of quality of life features added. This includes autosave and saving at the map screen, infinite tries on the bonus levels, checkpoints remembering the boxes you smashed, Crashy style box counters, not running off the sides of side-scrolling sections, and even hints in the loading screens that allude to the more painfully obtuse secrets, like this infamous example in Temple Ruins. It also has brand new features of its own. Time trials, which debuted in Crash 3, are available in Crash 1 and 2, and beating Cortex in Crash 2 unlocks the Crash Dash from 3. Perhaps the biggest addition is Coco, originally restricted to certain levels in 3, but fully playable in almost all levels of the trilogy, although you will need to beat the first boss of 1 and 2 in order to unlock her in those. Then there's the 2 DLC levels. Stormy Ascent in Crash 1 is a follow-up to Slippery Climb that was originally cut for its sheer difficulty, while Future Tense in Crash 3 is a brand new level that takes some inspiration from Crash 1's cut waterfall level, and requires you to use every unlockable move in the game in order to fully complete it. It also goes without saying that the game is a graphical upgrade. While the presentation tends to dip a bit in the 2 sequels, like the jet ski levels and Warped, overall the graphics are very impressive and fully realize the characters, objects and environments from the PS1 originals. Cutscene animation in particular is stunning, feeling on par with big budget animated movies and full of life and character.
Uh-oh!
But there are some concessions. The biggest point is the jumping. Crash falls a lot faster than normal, and his hitbox now appears to be round, rather than flat. This means that jumps you'd normally make now require more distance, and clipping the edge only to slide off is very common until you learn to compensate for it. It makes all 3 games even harder, especially Crash 1 since you don't have the slide jump to help out. It doesn't pair well with the stiff controls and the poor handling in almost all the vehicle levels. You can also argue that the remake doesn't understand what the originals were going for sometimes, such as how the 4K look muddies the faces of characters like Tiny and Pinstripe. For another example, in Crash 3's intro, Uka Uka is silhouetted and Entropy walks out from the shadows, neither of which happened in the N-Sane version of the scene. This is also evident in the music, where some tracks don't hit the same mood as before. Temple Ruins is another good example. Luckily, the CTR remake lets you swap in the original music in the options menu. Speaking of which...
Get in the slow lane, buddy! Check your meters.
By comparison, Nitro-Fueled is a more straightforward recommendation compared to the N-Sane trilogy. In our opinion, it's a straight upgrade over the original. Controls are easier to work with, Ultra Sacred Fire is clearer and works more logically, it includes every track from the original game and the Nitro Kart sequel, and it has a large amount of post-release content from the Grand Prix events, adding new tracks, characters, and many cosmetics for the new customization system. A significant addition is the driving styles. Normally, the performance of the kart was tied to the character you picked. While this was carried over to the remake, Beenox later added driving styles, which lets you pick the performance of the kart independently of the character. Now, players were totally free to choose and customize whoever they wanted, and controversial class picks, like not giving Hunter the speed class, were no longer an issue. There's a host of other great features and improvements too. You can freely change your class in the adventure mode, there's a new ring rally mode that's the fastest you can go in the game, and the story mode now supports difficulty settings. It all makes for a fun and exhilarating experience overall, perfectly dovetailing with the game's focus on rewarding skilled players with high speed and new shortcuts. That said, while local multiplayer is good, Nitro-Fueled's Online has some big issues. It uses a typical games as a service approach to the store, so you can't just go and buy the specific cosmetics you want. And even when you use the Wumpa challenges and know how the online multipliers work, like Wumpa Time and the weekend bonus, it can take a very long time to grind out the Wumpa coins to buy things with, unless you submit to buying, yep, microtransactions. As well, online play is very shaky these days, with frequent disconnects due to the lack of lobby host migration, which again makes earning Wumpa coins all the more difficult. It's just not as fun anymore. So, which is best? Naturally, this will be a very subjective answer, but if you have the discs and just want to play on an HD TV, the PS3 is a very good option to pick, since it's the most plug-and-play option. The PS1 Classics are fine too, but we find them rather blurry. If you're going for authenticity, nothing beats playing on the original PlayStation 1, but that requires extra considerations to get going on a modern TV. If you find the old graphics to be an eyesore, it's very easy to get a hold of the N-Sane Trilogy nowadays with all of its quality of life improvements, but you'll be dealing with stiffer controls and harder jumps. CTR Nitro-Fueled fares better. We feel that it renders the original CTR redundant, outside of those seeking the original 90s experience specifically. As for PlayStation Plus Premium, if the PS1 Crash games do get released there, we'd recommend it to those who like the look of the originals but don't want their rougher edges, or are jumping in for the first time. The rewind feature and being able to save anywhere helps solve most of their aging issues, helping you enjoy the superior platforming experience with modern conveniences.